Okay. So my name is DJ Antonio Caesar, providing you the music. All of those are original productions from our local community artists. Faith and Place, thank you so much for supporting local artists that are environmentally conscious and socially conscious, trying to move forward these initiatives. So on behalf of all of the artists, we thank you. And I'm going to hand it off to the executive director, Reverend Brian Sauter, to start with the introduction.
Amen. Thank you, DJ Antonio Caesar. For all of you can know, his contact information is not only in the slides, but follow him at DJ Antonio Caesar so that you can continue to support his good work at Faith and Place. We believe in good music, good food, and building healthier communities together. As we gather tonight, I want to invite you to take a moment to pause, to put your feet on the ground, to breathe. And as we gather together tonight from all over, I'm seeing putting in the chat where people are gathering from, we wish to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the native lands we are meeting on and all their elders past and present. If you want to learn more about the traditional custodians of the native lands where you are joining from us for this virtual gathering tonight, please see the native land link that we're going to put in the chat box down on the right. Welcome to our fourth workshop during our 2020 Green Team Summit, where we are discovering and exploring a just recovery, ways that we can take on the three major crises facing us as people of faith and conscience. How do we tackle and make a measurable difference when we think about climate change, racism, and the global pandemic? This is our fourth workshop, and we are grateful that you are here with us tonight. I want to just take a moment for you to get oriented to the technology. We're using the Zoom room. Feel free to play with the technology. If you click up in the right-hand corner, there is gallery view or speaker view. Play with that, get the view that you like to see tonight. In the middle between my picture and the slides that say welcoming words, there's a slide bar that you can slide back and forth, making either the slides bigger or the picture bigger. There's a chat function. Many of you are already chatting, but if you haven't chatted yet, that's a place where you can share further resources, engage with one another, links of resources that you want to share, celebrating all of you coming from many places. If you haven't already, just put, hey, I'm coming from this location or that location in the chat so that you can see where all of us are coming together in this virtual setting for the 2020 Annual Green Team Summit. I want to give you a heads up that we're going to hear from our brilliant speaker this evening for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms where you get the opportunity to get to know other people, rooms of 7 people or more. Please stay for these breakout rooms, as it's an opportunity not only to digest the content further, but to meet people from all across the world. And I just want to say, even if you're, maybe uncomfortable and don't want to speak, that's okay. Join the breakout room anyway. Keep your video on and off, whatever's most comfortable for you. Do join the breakout room. There's no obligation to talk, but simply a welcome space to listen and share as you like. After the breakout room this evening, we'll come back here to the main room to ask questions of our brilliant speaker. Reverend Cindy Shepard, our Central Illinois Outreach Director, will help the speaker facilitate those questions. And at that time and any time in the evening, if you have any questions at all, please put them in the chat function and we'll either ask those of the speaker or get those answered as you have any sort of technology or other questions that come up. The Green Team Summit is made possible by sponsors. I can't say thank you enough to all of our sponsors, but particularly want to shout out tonight Karen J. and Bob Lewis, who are specifically sponsoring this session. So thank you to all of our sponsors. And at this time, I hear we have a Green Team Award to give out. Tonight, we are giving out the award for the Southern Illinois Region Green Team Award. And I'm delighted to introduce you to our Southern Illinois Outreach Coordinator for the introduction of this award, Christina Grost. Christina?
My name is Christina Grost. I'm the Southern Illinois Outreach Coordinator, and I am thrilled to present the Green Team Award for Southern Illinois to First Christian Church of Carbondale. Al Parr and Reverend Karen Canote are with us, and they're accepting the award on behalf of their Green Team, but they were some of the first people I met when I went to Southern Illinois, And they have truly been leaders in the Southern Illinois community in environmental work. They have a solar installation at their house of worship. They've done further LED light retrofitting, and they've also really been instrumental in getting a solar group by in Southern Illinois, the first ever in that region, as well as working toward a community solar installation through the Solar for All program in Illinois. And so they are doing their best to connect people in Southern Illinois with solar energy, and we're just thrilled that we get to work with them. Al Parr himself is a pretty accomplished photographer and naturalist who advocates for the plants and animals around the SIU campus, and then teaches about those plants and animals to his congregation. And so we've got some real environmental leadership in beautiful Southern Illinois. So thank you, First Christian Church of Carbondale, for your terrific work. And we'll toss it back to Brian.
Hey, congratulations, First Christian Church of Carbondale, for your amazing work. It's just so neat to hear and to see and to learn more about how faith communities are leading for a just recovery throughout all over the nation, all over the world. And our goal tonight is to continue to celebrate those who are leading the ways, to inspire the rest of us to continue to follow suit. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Sal Valley. Sal is our social media and press coordinator for the Faith in Place Action Fund. And Sal is going to introduce our speaker for this evening. Sal?
Hey everyone, I hope you all are having a good evening tonight. For those of you who are just logging into our virtual Green Team Summit for the first time, I welcome you all. We're so happy to have you all here. And for those of you who have been on this ride with us already, we're so glad you're back, and we're looking forward to learning more about the intersections of COVID-19, racial justice, and climate change with you all. As Brian said, my name is Sal Valley, and I'm the social media and press coordinator for the Faith in Place Action Fund. The Faith in Place Action Fund is the political arm of Faith in Place, and we work as people of faith and conscience to promote political action for environmental justice in Illinois. If your faith community would like to join us in advocating for equitable ways Illinois can transition to clean energy or learn more, please reach out to me through email, which I'll drop in the chat later, or check out our website, which I'll also drop in the chat, but it's faithinplaceaction.org. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Monica Brown-Moss, a community of faith leader who's passionate for food justice and an entrepreneur. She's the chair of the Greater Chicago Food Depository and also a member of the board of directors of the Illinois Action for Children and McCormick Seminary. And with that, I'll give her the floor.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm going to start my timer so I can make sure I keep everything going and we can have this wonderful discussion about talking about local food economies. So first off, let me just thank Faith in Place. I'm just so excited for this opportunity and just to see how you all have continued to make such a huge impact in the city of Chicago and across this nation and the world, really. Okay, so I want to thank Reverend Brian, and I also want to just thank all of the staff. Elena has been especially helpful to me as I've tried to get my presentation together, and she's kept me on track, and so I want to thank her. But I also just want to say that, you know, the work of Faith in Place is so important because as they continue to strive to build healthier communities and more just communities, we are in a time right now where the significance of that is just unparalleled. We are dealing with racism in a way that we never have before. Of course, global climate change that we see playing out right now in our nation, as well as this global pandemic of COVID-19. So this, just having time to talk about this at this summit is just so important, especially right now. So I want to thank everyone for making this possible, especially to the Lewises for sponsoring this workshop this evening. But also I want to say to you all, the concerned people who are taking part in this summit, that thank you for tuning in and for making this a priority. And I know we all are spending a lot of time on Zoom calls and things like that, but I think this is a time well spent. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And so, I think it's been a great week, a wonderful start with wonderful presenters who are coming from a variety of different perspectives. And so my thanks goes to them as well. So to move on, I want to talk about the objectives of this presentation. And so what we want to talk about as we talk about a just recovery, we're going to talk about food tonight. And my task is, it's a little broad, but it's important that we really start with a foundational kind of perspective. And I have these two quotes that typically when I do a presentation, these are kind of what what leads me. So the first one is, when you have more than you need, you build a bigger table and not a higher fence. So that is something that I kind of lead with, that this idea that we all really do need to understand that when we have excess, when we have more than what we need, and we know that as a nation, we produce more than what we need, and it makes no sense that people still go hungry. So this idea of building a bigger table and not a barrier between access, so that people cannot have access, is one of the things that I always lead with. And then the other is, if you tell me what you eat, I will tell you what you are. And so I think that that is especially important as we think about the communities where food access is more difficult. And you think about, we've all heard, and we all know, and some people may have even experienced what it's like to have to live with a lack of quality, nutritious food. And so these are some of the ideas I wanted to start with, to think about as we think about what does it mean when we talk about local food, but also a just recovery, and how food plays into that. We can go to the next slide. So I have a video I want to play for you. To set up the video, it really is just a way to, it's a California garden, but it's a way that we can think about how we are looking at food as workforce development, economic viability, returning citizens, or those who've been justice involved, for them to have an opportunity to resume being a part of the workforce, as well as how local food economies can provide healthy food to communities. And so that is also key. And I think if we could start with the video, that would be great. It's about 2 minutes long, but it just sets us up. This isn't a Chicago community garden, but it is one that really kind of shows us how they can make a huge impact into communities. Okay, so that was a little bit about how a community garden can actually just impact the food access, as well as helping those who need reentry into into society, into an economy. So let's talk about this very quickly. So why a local food economy matters. 2020 and COVID-19, we're going to call this the Great Revelation. I think that what COVID-19 did was it just ripped the Band-Aid off of everything that we knew was existing, and now we have to deal with it. One of the greatest being that African-American people are, and really people who are Black and brown people, but especially African-American people, the underlying health conditions that have kept us sick for so long were now the greatest component of why COVID-19 took so many lives. And so many people have gotten sick and continue to get sick. And it really is because we are living out the vestiges of many, many years of a lack of access to real nutritious food, but also the education that goes along with that. And when I say real food, I mean whole food. I mean food that comes from the ground and grows from the ground. And so what it really has revealed is that food justice becomes a social justice issue. And I know that we are all very well aware of that because of our connection with Faith in Place. Food justice is the next civil rights. It actually has been ongoing, but it is absolutely a civil rights issue. And even in the video that was just shown, even no matter what your political standing is or your personal philosophy, we all have to agree that food is what we need. Everyone has to have it. Everyone needs it. And it only makes sense that we all have access to healthy, nutritious food. And so it is very interesting to me, and I'm very fascinated by the whole history of food and food access and the cultural ramifications of food, especially for African American people in this country, because of the way we were brought to this country as enslaved people. But even with that process, we brought along food traditions that we continue to see played out today. So one of them that I'd love to talk about is red, black, and greens. And it's a play on the words for the red, black, and green African-American flag, but red, black, and greens meaning green leafy vegetables. And so there are historical implications that really do inform our future possibilities. And so one of the things I'd like that for us to think about and talk about is how African American people, when they came to this nation, as I mentioned, they brought along with them food staples that were indigenous to their, wherever they came from, whatever country or region they came from in Africa, usually from West Africa. However, when they got here, and they actually put those into great use. And so and they are still being utilized today. One of the things I'd like to say about that is that I'm fascinated with Chicago in particular as a transplant, and I want to give a shout out to all the people who are in the listening right now. It looks like about almost 200 people are here, and I see that there are people from all over. And I'm looking at people from the South, where I'm from Virginia and Florida, and I see some Florida people on here. And I'm just thinking about what it must have been like for those people who did the Great Migration between like 1900 and even all the way up to like 1970 to big cities across this nation. But when I think about Chicago in particular, there are so many historical implications of these people who came looking for a better life. They were fleeing the Jim Crow South, and they were coming north to find jobs, to find better housing, and to find dignity. And many times their food traditions were interrupted because of a move to a big city with a different climate, with where it was cold for much of the year, so their growing season was different, and they had to figure out a way to exist in a new place where all of their traditions were interrupted in some type of way. And even in a place like Chicago, though, there has been this lingering connection to the land. And what we see is that even though people had to move into smaller plots of land, they were living in buildings and not on farms as they had been living in the South, there has still been this tradition that we see resurging and creating garden spaces. And we're seeing it now with gardens all across this city and garden programming. And actually we'll have some pictures of our garden at our church, which is Trinity United Church of Christ, where my husband is the pastor. And so we actually moved here about 14 years ago to come to Chicago for this church. But what we have been able to do is to try to build a local green food economy, because, and here we go, here are some pictures to talk about. Here, this is our garden right now. These are people who are working. Many of them are returning citizens or people who have been justice involved. But the biggest part of what I want you to know, and if you look at the smallest lady in the picture with the red shirt on, she is a community leader. And one of my points that I'll come back to is the importance of community leadership when we are trying to build programs for local food. We can go to the next picture. We just took these this morning, actually. So it's a beautiful grasshopper I found. This young man is one of our master gardeners, actually, as is this young lady. These are people who we got a grant so that we could actually employ them to be a part of our garden. We can go to the next picture. And what is important about this is that a garden space is not only a food space, but it's an educational space. So this is a picture of our interpretation of George Washington Carver, who was the scientist known for all the different things he did with peanuts. And so this is just a mural in that garden. And, you know, young people come to the garden. The young people did that mural, but this is also just another shot of like just a pretty picture of greens growing, collard greens growing. And so thanks for showing those pictures. So, right, so just the historical implications that linger on. And so with that, we have people who were disconnected from land, but now they are having opportunities to return to learning about how to grow food, food in its natural state. I'll never forget a little boy who came to one of our farmers market days, because we also have a farmers market, and he was asking, he picked up a tomato and he goes, well, what is this? And we were all astounded, because we couldn't believe that a little kid didn't know what a tomato was, but he had never seen a tomato that wasn't chopped up like it for a hamburger, so a sliced tomato. So to have an opportunity to connect people to food is why local food economies are so important. Because really, if we go to our next point, it's opportunities for investment and economic growth. And so I want to talk a little bit about what our church is doing. It's called Imani Village. And Imani Village is a dream. It's 27 acres of land on the south side of Chicago that we are developing. Currently, it's being developed. It's actually taking place as we speak. And it's an area where we are trying to build proactive zones for health and revitalization of the community. So it's economic empowerment. It's also the connection to eating healthy food. There's going to be a community garden there that is big enough to be a food hub and to supply not only residents of the area, but also restaurants and other entities where we can use food as a means of economic commerce. But also it's Advocate Healthcare has implemented one of their state-of-the-art proactive health centers there. And we're also in partnership with the Nature Conservancy to have a prescription garden where people will be prescribed from that health center time in a garden. So we're creating a garden structure. And we're taking this movement of green thought, and once again, the red, black, and greens, African American pride, and food being the hub of that. And so we are really invested in this idea of opportunities for economic growth. And this Imani Village project is one of those that is so important. It is a space where people can gather, but it's also a place where people will live. People will also have opportunities for retail. And it's just another way of looking at how food, because the hub of it will be food, food is a social justice component. So community wisdom. One of my greatest roles and a great privilege and an honor for me right now in my life is I have become involved with the Greater Chicago Food Depository. And as chair of the board, I really am very deeply invested in all that we do. And so one of the things that we have learned is that since food is fundamental for all of us, it doesn't, and when we think about, and I know I'm going to miss a whole lot of things because our time is short, but as we think about what happened because of COVID-19, because of the murder of George Floyd, because of the outcry, the pain and frustration that poured into the streets as people across the nation and the world started to lift their voices to express their frustrations and their pain because of racial tensions and racial inequities that have been going on for so long, we saw that there was we needed to be able to bring people together in the community. And what the riots did was in many ways disrupted the food systems, because retail food institutions, grocery stores, corner stores, family dollar stores were destroyed. People's access to food was interrupted. And so the work that I do with the Food Depository, which is, like I said, a great honor, was to be able to be a part of the pop-up food distribution sites. And what we saw with that was that not only do you have to provide people with food, but you have to provide people with nutritious food. It's not just about giving somebody something just to eat. It's about making sure that it's something that people want to eat and that it's good for them. And so what we saw, and I want to go back to this point of community wisdom, is that when you provide people with food, you have to make sure you are tapping into the community itself so that there is investment, so that people feel connected to that. And it's not about giving something to someone that you think they should have. It's about how do you meet the needs that come from the people and what have they voiced as a need. And I think that if we put on that perspective, we will be able to do so much more transformational work, because it's not like we're forcing anything on someone. We are receiving, and then we can invest. And so I wanted to just spend a little moment to talk about the lady I showed you in that picture, the smallest little lady. Her name is Mrs. King. And Mrs. King is a true leader. She has amazing skills. She's an organizer. She is a mother. She is a community go-to person. And there are people like that in every community. And what we think about when we think about how do we get the message of the importance of eating locally, it's never going to come from me standing there telling somebody, hey, eat this kale because it's good for you. It's going to come from Mrs. King saying, let's do a cooking demonstration over in Princeton Park or Loudon Homes. Let's open up the doors of our community centers. Maybe we can invite this lady in, but that's my time. But we can invite her in so that she can show us how to make some kale recipes. But maybe they don't want what I put in my kale salad. Maybe it becomes a group decision. And so local food, we know, is nutritious food. We know that it's important to introduce people to real whole food. And if it can be done within the parameters of their own communities, there is a huge, people will become invested in their own health, in their own communities, in the safety of their community. We know that gardens and green spaces make communities safer. So when we it's not just about someone coming in, it's about us becoming a part. It's never them over there, it's all of us together. And so a local response leads to local empowerment. I know my time is up, so I'll just say very quickly. A local response leads to local empowerment, and local empowerment becomes transformational. It's so key that we understand that it's not about outside intervention, it's about inside support. And so I think that the wisdom of the community, the wisdom of the voices of people is what leads to just a successful transformative moment for people to take charge of their own health through the foods that they eat. We could go on and on and on. I feel like we're rushed, but I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And listen, we're about to go into our breakout discussions for 10 to 15 minutes. Please don't leave. Stay, go into a group, because it's so important that you get to network with people, you get to meet people from all over the nation, and we'll need at least one person to go and record some notes and put it in the chat so that you will be able to, we'll have 2 breakout sessions so we can talk a little bit about your what you talk about in your discussion. I have 2 questions for you. I would love to get the answers from you, because I really would love to hear what you think, but also I would like you to put in your questions so we can have some time for talking about, or question and answer as well. So we're going to the breakouts now, and I'll be quiet. Thank you for your attention.
First of all, you talked about food as a social justice issue, as a civil rights issue. And so one of the questions that came up was, how do you see use of indigenous food traditions and historical food traditions as a way to address those and to build civil rights and social justice?
Wonderful question. One of the things that, let me tell you, I recently attended the Duke World Food Conference, and I was so blown away because I learned so much about how people are doing such creative things around their traditional food ways. And so I think that one of the things we can do, and it isn't just in urban settings, the one that I'm going to tell you about is not even an urban setting at all. But I do think that what we can do is when we make a return to consciously eat the way that food either grows by season or by location, I think that what we're doing is we are having an opportunity to invest those dollars into food systems and food economies, local economies that benefit our communities. And it comes from the perspective of we can either access what is already there, or we can create a demand around it. And so if we are, or if we're saying, like I found out about people it was in South Dakota, their native foodways, their traditional foods for the indigenous people there, it's not to eat chicken, it's not to eat poultry, but buffalo and salmon. I'm thinking it was in South Dakota. I hope I don't have that wrong. So what they were doing was they were creating a demand for those foods by teaching the traditional food ways. I'm convinced, and I'm very serious about this, people on the south side of Chicago eat Flaming Hots, and they eat junk food, or they eat these foods that are not good for them because it's what's available. But once they become educated about the benefits of eating a different way, there will become a demand. There's a man over on the south side of Chicago. He has a plot of land. I can't even tell you how small it is. It's not big at all. This is the collard green man. He grows so many collard greens, and everybody goes to him every year because he is known for that. He sells out of these collard greens every year because people wait for them. So it's about education. And as we talked about in our small group, it's about building relationships. If you know something about traditional foods, then you teach somebody else, they're going to start to create a demand. And then that is an opportunity for local growth.
That's great. Thank you so much. The comment that you made about receiving and investing in community leaders and those people that know the ways of cooking and serving this food, what do you think some good first steps would be towards finding and nurturing those people in the community?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because after just having the discussion we had today, I think that food is meant by nature, by design, to bring us all together. That's why I love that quote about build a bigger table. We don't need walls or fences between us. We need bigger tables where everyone can come. So one of the things that I think COVID, interestingly enough, we've gotten more separated maybe in physical proximity, but I think many of us would agree, we're talking to people we haven't spoken to in years and years, and we're spending more time on these platforms, talking to one another. But what I think is key is that we just have to get to know one another. It's that simple. We've got to talk to people. The only reason I know Mrs. King from our community is because Mrs. King knows everybody who's hungry. So when we're doing food distributions, she sends over a list and says, I need 25 boxes of food for these elders, for this lady who has a disability, for this family this lady has just taken in 6 of her grandchildren. So this is how I've gotten to know Mrs. King. And now if I'm ever in a bind, I'm going to Mrs. King, because she is the person who can make the connection. So I think it's about taking the time to build community, to know people's names. And then that is where, and a lot of times people ask, well, what can I do? What can I do? This isn't my particular community. I'm not from the community. I don't know people in the community. Get connected with someone who does know it. And it really makes a big difference.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit more about Amani Village. Give us an idea of what the size of the garden is.
Oh gosh. So I should have included some slides on that. I didn't know, I knew 20 minutes would go really quickly. Amani Village, picture 27 acres. That's kind of hard to picture in a city block, but picture, it's big. It's the garden itself is going to be at least 3 acres of that 27 acres. And I want the Nature Conservancy, picture a beautiful garden with fountains and sitting areas and trees. And so from the front, the facade looks like a typical office complex, but it's everything that is behind. That's where all the magic is happening, with all the beautiful nature that is being brought in. And see, that's where the creativity comes in. I should have talked about partnerships, because partnerships are key as well. Nature Conservancy heard about our work with trying to get people healthy through eating healthy food, and they said, well, let us come in and talk about how do we get people healthy by giving them a nature space to occupy? And so it's about the different partnerships, and that's why creativity is so amazing. Using your moral imagination to conceive of things, and then putting that moral imagination into moral action is just key. So Amani Village, once it's complete, like I said, right now, in that space right now, we have a beautiful health center. But then, and that's another partnership through Advocate Health Hospital. But we also have on that space, and it's a big office complex, we have a gymnasium where kids do gymnastics and they learn how to be cheerleaders and things like that. We also have in that space a group of mental health professionals who focus primarily on men, and not just African American men, but men who are experiencing trauma. So all of these things, it's kind of like if you build it, they will come. And that's kind of the things that are taking place. But the garden is still in production, and that's the next phase.
Very cool. I'm intrigued by the idea of a prescription garden. Is it actually like to eat the prescription garden, or to work in the garden as a prescription for your mental and spiritual health?
Actually, that's interesting you say that, because that's not it. It's not eating or working. It's just being. So it's beautiful. It's reflection ponds. And this is being built still. So it's reflection ponds. It's just a bench to sit. It's to bring your blood pressure down because you're just sitting next to a tree. Imagine that. You're hearing the wind. It's about just being in nature.
That sounds beautiful. I think I'm breathing easier already.
Me too.
Can communities of faith partner with community leaders that, like Mrs. King, in how would you suggest we get started doing that?
I think that communities of faith probably traditionally have always done this just naturally. But absolutely, I think a Mrs. King, it's really when you, it's anyone who, when you recognize them for their abilities or their talents or their gifts, I think that every faith community needs a Mrs. King. They need someone who can connect them and who knows people and that the community trusts. And I think that is the biggest thing, is that we have to build trust. And that's why going into a community and saying, this is what you need to do. We're going to put this garden right here, and this is what we're going to grow in this garden. No. Hi, everyone. I'm so-and-so. Listen, we have this land. What would you like to do with it? We have money to do a garden, but what would you like in the garden? How do you want the garden to look? Who do you want to work in the garden? What kids can we involve? All those types of things. So I do think faith communities naturally and intrinsically know how to locate Mrs. Kings in the world. But I do think that once you put it into your head that she is a viable, she's an asset to your community, looking for the Mrs. Kings becomes key. And Mrs. King is a member of our church, and I didn't even know it. And I'm working with her all the time. And finally she said, I'm a member of the church. I'm like, Mrs. King, I didn't even know it. I didn't care that she was a member. It's about the relationships.
That is terrific. It's about the relationships. It's about the bigger table.
Right. It's the bigger table. Yep.
It's so cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your vision with us and beautiful work that you're doing. I want to know that we all have discussions that now we can go back and have in our own places. And so thank you again. I want to give the mic back to Brian to close us out.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Monica, for being with us tonight. This is a great inspiration to hear from you and to hear about the latest of the good work that you are leading along with the community at Trinity and Amani Village. So thank you. And thank you, all of you, for your active engagement in the chat and the breakout rooms. This is a very particularly close subject to my heart. I got my start in seminary. I started a bunch of gardens, and it was a small little garden that we had in Champaign-Urbana with the Mennonite church that we partnered with the Mosque and Islamic Center. Just a small little space that started to bring people together, and pretty soon that led to a whole starting of Sola Gratia Farm in Urbana, and that has rippled out to many other communities all across Illinois. And so you just don't know what's going to happen when you come together to build those relationships around a piece of land and to acknowledge one another and to be together in nature like you're talking about. We've heard a lot of information tonight, and I want to invite you, reach on your desk like I'm doing, find a pen, find a piece of paper, and just take a second to think about what is it that you want to take away from this conversation tonight. What is one thing that you want to go talk to a family member about, or a friend, or take back to your faith community? What's one piece of education that you didn't know about that you want to make sure you remember? Or maybe there's something that you want to do, an action step that you want to take. I just want to invite you to write that down on your piece of paper. And if you want, go ahead and put that in the chat. Declare it to all of us. We'd love to see that in the chat. What's one thing you're going to take away from this brilliant time with Monica Moss tonight? I am delighted to tell you that we're right in the midst of the Green Team Summit. We have some amazing upcoming workshops in a half-hour time at 7:30. In fact, you can log in a little early to hear some DJing from DJ Antonio Caesar log in. We're going to learn more from our friends Ryan Wilson and Tracy Lewis from the Metropolitan Planning Council about the health and economic impacts of flooding in Illinois. We're going to end our evening together. Be sure to go have a stretch break, get some water, get some food, come back then to enjoy some good music, and then we'll dive right into that topic later on this evening. And then tomorrow night, I am just so excited. We kick off at 4:30 Central Time. All these times are in Central Time with the Deputy Governor of Illinois, Christian Mitchell. Christian is a former state representative, now the Deputy Governor. He is in charge of leading a just, equitable energy future with policy in Illinois. This is something that no matter where you're from, you can learn from how to get people returning individuals from the prison system, foster care alumni, employed in clean energy careers. How do we do just transition works? How do we make sure that green energy is a part of our just recovery from the pandemic, from the implications of racism, from climate change? And then that night is just going to start, or we go to Washington, D.C. for our friend Reverend Laura to lead us through an exercise, Why Migration Stories Matter. And then tomorrow night, all the way from Mexico, we have our friend Luis, who's going to talk about some scientific studies that he's been leading through bird watching about social isolation and loneliness by connecting to nature. So you don't want to miss those upcoming workshops that we have. I also want to bring your attention real quickly. We want to get your input. We have an exit survey available. If you complete that after you attend your last session, we want you to come to all the sessions, but maybe tonight's your last session. Definitely take a moment to complete that exit survey. We want to hear from you, and by completing the survey, you get put into a drawing for some fabulous prizes. Sustainable apparel from United by Blue, informative environmental books, fair trade fans, Faith in Place t-shirts. You're going to be eligible for all that, so definitely complete that survey. If you look at the chat, I see the chat is going, some great stuff's going on there. You can download that chat. There's little 3 dots at the bottom right next to the file. If you click those 3 dots, you can say download that chat. It'll download all the good information that people shared tonight from that chat. The Green Team Summit is free for all of us to attend. It does cost us money from our amazing tech team, our amazing speakers. So if you are able, please consider making a donation to help us cover the cost of this important event. Thank you to many of you who have already donated in support. You can donate by texting GTS 2020 to the number 44321, or you can visit faithandplace.org to fill out an online form to donate there by credit card, or to find our address to send in the check. Be sure to follow us on our social media at Faith and Place. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, I'm Reverend Brian Souter, Executive Director of Faith and Place. Big shout out to our keynote presenter tonight, Monica Moss. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to DJ Antonio Caesar to close us out with some good music as we go and prepare ourselves for the next workshop later tonight. DJ Antonio, the floor is yours.